Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Uma Talks. Today we are talking to Lisa Yates from the Nottingham NHS Trust. Lisa, welcome to the show. Do you want to just give us a bit of a background of your role and what you do for Nottingham?
Yeah, sure. So I've been working at Nottingham University Hospitals now for just over 3 years, and I joined the digital and strategy team. When I joined, the NRC was already underway. So that is the National Rehabilitation Centre, which is due to open in the new year, which will specialise in rehabilitation for patients around the Midlands. It will be the first of its kind in the country, hence why it's called the National Rehabilitation Centre. It essentially will be the blueprint for other rehabilitation centres that will be built subsequent and will kind of form the strategy of how other trusts will deliver rehabilitation, because at the moment, how we deliver rehabilitation in this country is really far from where it needs to be.
Right.
So my role within digital has been to support the journey with identifying what digital innovations can be implemented within the building to improve efficiencies and improve experience from a staff and patient perspective. So I've worked quite closely with the team that are currently at Linden Lodge, which is the current rehabilitation unit within Nottingham University Hospital. So we've spent quite a lot of time working with the staff and the patients there to really identify what the challenges are, and then exploring the market to see what solutions out there can address those issues.
Awesome. So when you say NRC, a National Rehabilitation Centre, it's not that people will come to there from different regions then, it is just the national standard. It's more of a, like you said, blueprint. Or will you get patients coming from other?
So we will have a wider cohort than what we do currently. So it will be across the Midlands, and I think potentially patients from Sheffield, but ultimately it will be within the immediate region. It is a 70-bed unit, whereas currently Linden Lodge is only a 25-bed unit. So it does have capacity to take a wider geographical area, but it will be, like I say, the blueprint for other rehabilitation units to be built across the country.
Excellent. So at what point did you realise that space, data and people was a critical combination in the design of this, and it wasn't just about it being tech that can kind of help? And I know we're talking about digital and technology, but did anything else sort of jump out when you were looking at this?
So I came into the project quite late. However, I spent a significant amount of time at Linden Lodge, which you spent time there yourself, so you know how critical and how short on space they were within that unit to be able to deliver the care that they needed to and the rehabilitation that they needed to. So I think after spending time with staff and with patients, it became more apparent to us how important it was to be able to manage the space and actually collect that data. So just to give one example of what's really driving forward some of the innovation that we're doing that you're supporting with, for the rehabilitation patients, they have to have 15 hours of rehabilitation contact time with staff throughout a week. So imagine that's across different disciplines: physiotherapy, speech and language, mental health, etc., etc. And then you times that by 25 patients within a resource, within a space, and trying to coordinate all of those things together. It became quite critical for us to be able to understand how that would work and to improve the process and their workflow of actually how they map those resources and that rehabilitation time out. So that became really crucial.
Yeah, and like you say, I've kind of been helping with that, and I've seen firsthand that these guys are absolutely brilliant. So the facility will be really useful for them. So speaking of the NRC up and coming, and I mean 20 beds to 70, it's a big shift, big change. You're kind of working in a dual role then, right? So you've got the NRC coming up, but you've still got legacy estates.
Mm-hmm.
Is that it? Are you done? Or is there more to it? Are you still keeping the legacy stuff? Have you got a dual role now?
So for NRC, because my role was to implement the digital technology, the network, everything else associated with it. But really, my role after NRC goes live is to take the learnings from NRC and from Linden Lodge, because crucially, we implemented and installed quite a lot of the technology at Linden Lodge to trial before we went to procurement for NRC, which meant that I've now got the experience of the difficulties or challenges that we have with implementing these technologies within an existing estate, but also a new build. And obviously, they're two completely different kettles of fish. So my role now going forward will be to create a blueprint of what we've done at the NRC, along with the learnings that we gained from installing at Linden Lodge, to be able to utilize for when we've got capital and redesign projects, but also if we're doing retrofitting and if there's ward redesign, so that we can make sure that as we're going forward, building new spaces, reconfiguring new spaces, that we're approaching it with the same plan to make sure that we are creating spaces that are equal across the trust and have the infrastructure in that we need to be able to enable future digital innovation and including what we're doing at NRC.
So you've mentioned there that getting staff input was a critical part of that. How did you manage that and actually get them involved? Because I can imagine pulling all those different people together. Is there a certain, I think this is more as well for people that are listening that are going on the journey that you guys have been on. What would you recommend and say you did well to get those people together? You know, what did you kind of, I suppose I'm saying give away your secrets and tell everybody how you got to this point with them.
I don't think it's that complicated. It
No?
was really just basing myself in Linden Lodge a lot of the time. So it did predate me. So obviously there was Jamie and Ben who were on my team who started off the stakeholder engagement. And I think initially you do have to get that senior leadership team on board, because without that, it's going to be very difficult to be able to bring anything to fruition and kind of bring the rest of the team along with it successfully. So there was a lot of time spent with senior leadership team on the wards to explain what the ambition was, why we were there, and why it was really important that they support us with that by telling us what it is that they needed and wanted. And then as we went through the process of identifying suppliers who could meet or deliver on what they were asking for in terms of a product or a service, we then obviously liaised with the ward manager, in particular Sarah. She was fantastic and she's really supportive of digital innovation, and without her I don't know how far we would have got. So she was really critical, but we made sure that as we were installing things, we were keeping staff up to date with what we were doing. We were keeping them informed. So we would say, right, you know, we're installing this technology now, this is how it works and this is what it will do. And also just being really open to the feedback as well, because as we were installing things in, a lot of it was off the shelf or it was in development, and kind of managing expectations with staff to say, we're just trialing this. It's not going to be the final perfect solution. We really need you to use it. Let us know what works well and what doesn't, so that we can feed that back to the supplier and have that co-design approach, so that we end up with a solution that actually does meet the needs. Because I think one of the issues that we had, there wasn't really anything that you could just buy off the shelf that we could put in that would do what it needed to do. And one of the reasons why the trials, in my opinion, were really successful is that we worked with suppliers who were really engaging and happy to do that co-design. So I think ultimately it's just keeping staff informed, but also listening to them and being proactive with the feedback. Then they feel that they've been engaged with.
I completely agree. I think listening to what people's frustrations are on the ground is really important. So I think that leads into the types of equipment. So like what sort of things have we landed on with the NRC? What sort of equipment were you trialing? I think it'd be good for people to understand that level of it, and how you got to get to all these suppliers, how you got introduced to them, what were kind of catalysts behind that?
So we had quite a few different technologies that we installed. Some were more patient facing, some were more based on infrastructure and looking at the integration with the BMS, for example. So we had intelligent bedside terminals that would provide patients with the ability to not only just have patient entertainment, but be able to control their environmental controls to a degree. So opening and closing blinds, turning lights on and off, and making sure that it was adaptable as possible with voice controls, etc. To things like asset tracking. So we installed RTLS beacons throughout the building, because one of the things that staff had raised, even though Linden Lodge is quite a small unit, was they would spend loads of time walking around looking for bits of equipment,
Find things, yeah.
trying to find things. And actually, when you add it up, everyone doing that X amount of times throughout the day, it's quite a significant amount of time that they are wasting when they could be delivering clinical care. So we tagged manual handling equipment, medical devices, anything that they would typically use that would move around the building. We installed some digital signage screens that would be able to be used to display the different applications that we'd put in, which obviously the asset tracking was one. And then your system, Uma. As we've already mentioned, room booking and resource management was one of the key things that they'd also fed back that was a real struggle to be able to plan. So on a Monday, you've been to this session, all the staff would sit down, so 20, 30 people in a room, and it would be a manual task where they would go, right, I've got John on a Monday at 11 o'clock, I'm going to have this space in the gym, which was all quite limited. If anything changed to that plan throughout the week, there was no record of it. It had to be manually changed. It was, don't get me wrong, they were very efficient at doing it, but a very complex task that was manual. So anything that we could do to improve that. And one of the really interesting things about implementing your system in particular, we spent a lot of time with the staff teaching them how to use certain systems. But with your system, I remember it went live on a Friday. So we had the room booking screens outside the gym and the one meeting room that they had. And we'd planned to come in on Monday to show them how to use it, and they were already using it over the weekend. They'd already, because it was obviously so intuitive, but also they could see the value of it. We didn't have to come in and convince them to use it; they were already using it, and to me, that completely sold it. I thought, well, that's fantastic.
No, it's a big, part of what we try and do is design the platform to be user centric, and that's what we've done as we kind of move forward with that. So as you're kind of walking around a space, I think I'd like to kind of get into understanding, as you walk around that space, what metrics do you look for to say this will make this a great ward or a great unit or a great building, aside from things like occupancy or data? Like what do you try and look at?
I don't know. How do I answer that one? I guess from the NRC perspective, and again, I haven't been involved in the design as such, but what they've really tried to create is to have a home from home environment rather than it feeling really clinical. All the spaces, they're not calling them wards, they're calling them zones. Along the concourse, there's breakout areas, there's lounges, there's TVs. Would you want to make it feel more of that kind of space?
Say you didn't know how to answer that. You've done a really good job with that.
Thanks.
Because I call it ambient experiences. You don't want alarms going off. You don't want anyone to feel like it's not. If they're going to be there for 3 months, it needs to be very homely feel to it, and also a caring feel. And I think that's been encapsulated really well in how the team work in Linden Lodge. So yeah, I think it's fantastic. So you, in your view, then, do you think retrofitting spaces comes with any constraints at all? So we've talked on this podcast, off this podcast, and I've known you now for 2 years. And we talk about retrofitting. Is there any constraints or barriers that you can see get put in the way?
I think yes, definitely. However, I would say that they're not unachievable. So having installed or retrofitted some of these things, which included, going into the infrastructure, whether that be the physical infrastructure of the building or the network infrastructure, we faced loads of challenges. One being that the ward was always at max capacity. So actually being able to have the space and time to be able to access the spaces that you need to be able to retrofit was one. In terms of what the state of the building is. As we know, Linden Lodge was quite an old building. Heating only worked in certain parts of it. So when we were looking to control heating, for example, well, that's great if the heating actually does work.
If it lets you do it.
There was asbestos above the windows, so that dictated how we fitted the blinds in. And also because we were putting extra capacity on the hub room for the network, it really wasn't an ideal location.
Yeah.
It was actually in the ladies' fitting room, so you had
Wow.
to go
Yeah.
into the ladies' fitting room. But because it was a changing room as well, lots of dust, which is obviously
Yeah.
the worst thing for server
Yeah.
and kit. We also had the heating pipe running directly underneath the cab, which was creating overheating issues.
So actual heating running under
Yeah,
a cab that needs to be cooled.
yes,
And
yeah, yeah. So
brilliant.
then we had to install an air conditioning unit in the ladies' fitting room, which you can imagine didn't go down great either because
Yeah.
they were cold getting changed.
Wow.
Um, there were lots. I could probably list dozens and dozens of challenges that we had with retrofitting. However, it didn't stop us from doing it. I think there were times
Yeah.
when we did kind of think, is it worth it?
Yeah. Did you
For
feel like you had to compromise at any stage on anything?
no, I think we just found
Just
we found workarounds for most of it. I don't think there was anything that we said actually we're not going to do that now just
yeah.
because it's proving challenging. It was actually, well, what's the solution
Yeah.
to it? And I think so in that case, it took a lot longer than we anticipated it to because of the challenges that we hadn't necessarily anticipated. But we found a way around, and I'm really glad that we did because as much as the reason for the trials was multifaceted, really. But
Yeah.
the greatest learnings that I like to talk about is actually what we've learned from the retrofitting experience, and what we've learned at Linden Lodge would apply to retrofitting pretty much
Yeah.
any other building.
Yeah.
There might be other challenges that we didn't experience, but I think we would probably cover quite a few of them. So it's given us a good understanding now going forward. So for the rest of the trust, where we do want to obviously bring it up to modern day where we
Yeah.
can, we will understand what those challenges are now because we've gone through that process.
So you touched there about a building, no matter whether it be a hospital or any building, really. I think if somebody, so it says somebody came to you and I put a workplace leader in front of you, Lisa, and said, right, what 3 questions would you get them to ask before starting and embarking on a journey of a smart building?
What do they want to achieve?
Yep.
Um, what's their budget?
Yep.
Um, and what challenges do they already foresee?
Yeah. Yeah. I think that budget's a good one because you've got varying things you can do at different scales.
Yeah.
We played with budgets on the NRC right from the top, middle, bottom, middle, bottom, middle, top, and worked out where we were going to land to get to that point. So I think definitely I agree with you on budget. And the 2 other ones are, what problems are you facing and what do you want to achieve as an outcome? I think they're really good, simple questions. And I think the reason why I wanted the simple answer there is because I think a lot of people overcomplicate what they're going to do if they start on that journey. And doesn't need to be, complicated in that way. Building management platforms like ours that do all of these automated things often talk about usage analytics and occupancy and hybrid patterns. How would you translate that we've done with things like that for organizations in a commercial context, for instance?
I think it's really good to know how your space is being used. And I think, regardless of what your organization is, I think that's really key. We know there's always going to be spaces that are probably overutilized and ones that are underutilized. And why is that? And actually, that can really then dictate how you plan your spaces going forward. But also things like linking it to your energy consumption and your energy monitoring. Where are you wasting money? Where can savings be made? Where can you improve a particular environment or area through room conditioning, etc.? Is there a reason why that space isn't being used, or that room's always cold? There's so many different use cases, and I think once you have an understanding of how your building is being used, you can then optimize on that and use it to, I guess, plan future space users or even repurpose space if it's not being utilized.
Yeah.
Well, then if it's a waste, then what else can it be used for? So I think there's so many things that you can do with it.
Yeah, I think data is only useful as well if it's acted upon. So, I mean, what would you say is the biggest barrier to an organisation starting on this process? I think, I've got my view on it, but like, what's the biggest barrier in your mind?
I think sometimes people don't necessarily think about what they could do with that information and that data. And it maybe is a bit of an afterthought of
Yeah.
actually, is it that important? And it is something that even on the NRC, we obviously have spent a lot of money on the building management system. But even then, there were a lot of conversations and debate around, well, do we actually need that? And probably some functionality that could have been utilised was maybe taken out for financial reasons, because
Yeah.
obviously we did have quite a strict budget to
Yeah.
work towards, which, looking from a long-term plan, you would be able to see the return on investment
Yeah.
over a longer period of time. But ultimately, we're the NHS, so we're quite budget constrained with
Yeah.
what we can deliver. But I think it's just looking or just understanding what it can do. Really,
Yeah.
I didn't have a lot of knowledge about BMS and
Yeah.
infrastructure and the importance of it and what you can do, and the benefits that it will bring before I started working at the NHS,
Yeah.
because it wasn't on my radar
No.
in this role. But having now been through this journey, to be cheesy, I think it's really crucial.
Yeah, I do agree with that. It's having that data and then presenting it in a way, because once you start on the journey and you don't consider everything up front around what that data is going to do, and you go ahead, you are back in a scenario where you may not be able to even go back and fit something in or do something. So that's one of my pieces of advice. Sit down and figure out, will this data provide me the information I need in 5 years, in 3 years? And I think that's really important.
And I
So
think, oh,
sorry,
sorry.
no, go
No,
on.
I was just going to say, I think that was one of the key things that when we were discussing what we were going to put in the NRC, is making sure that we just had the infrastructure right. Because even if we don't have the finance to be able to deliver on all of the things that we wanted, we made sure that we had the infrastructure in, so that in 5 years, 10 years, we've got the foundations right, so that we can actually add and build on
Build on
that
it.
when we get future, if we get
When, if,
if we get future investment. And I think
yeah,
that's really crucial, because it's a fraction of the cost to do it at that
yeah,
point, rather than trying to retrofit, as we've already
yeah.
talked about.
And I do think that if you are proactively looking at it like that, prevention is cheaper than the cure.
Yeah, always.
So we talk about backlogs and maintenance budgets, and it's all publicly available information via NHS England. And there is a lot of maintenance and backlog. If we can address the inefficiencies in fixing things, and I think that really would help. So starting at that point, and this is not just within the NHS, I think any building or any space or vertical can start there and look at what data they want to get out of the space. And then we put the technology at the end, is the best way for us to go. So in your view then, what will be the kind of top 2 to 3 building or space management trends over the next 5 years that we're going to see? What should building owners, occupiers look out for and be preparing for?
I think the to be able to be agile. So I think buildings that I've had the benefit of visiting, where they do have a digital twin or a BMS system where they can pull this data to see how it's been utilized, but then they've been able to use that information to be able to make a business decision of, actually, we're not utilizing that space, or that space is too small or too big, and having the ability to be able to change
Yeah,
where you can. And also input into business decisions. So, for example, a building that we went to in London that had quite a sophisticated BMS and digital twin, they had a cafeteria restaurant on site for staff, for visitors, etc. But because they had a people count sensor, they knew that at certain times of the day or on certain days of the week, predominantly Friday, they didn't have as much footfall. So they decided to close the restaurant on that day,
yeah,
because it was actually costing them money to keep it open
like
on
the
that day.
supplies and everything.
So when you can look at how it's going to impact on savings,
Yeah,
on your commercial, your return, then, it kind of pays for itself eventually.
I agree. Occupancy is one of the biggest kind of ways to look at the first saving, and taking those trends and right sizing your space for the people that are going to be in. Closing a restaurant is absolutely, in my view, it's saving them on buying food, wasting food, staff
Yeah.
resources going in. I think it's a really good idea to kind of do that. We've done things in the past where canteens have put those sensors in, so staff can actually go for their lunch break when it's not busy, so they're not wasting 15 minutes queuing for their food and then they've only got 20 minutes to eat it really fast. They can kind of look at the occupancy and go, oh, I'm going to go to this canteen now, and that worked. I mean, this was on a big site with 5 canteens, and staff were just like, I'll go to that one and do it this way. So yeah, definitely lots of use cases in that way.
Oh,
So
can I add another one as
yeah, of
well?
course, go for it. Add as many as you want. Everyone wants to know.
Yeah, I think in terms of the connectivity to a space as well is really important. So as you said, well, as we've mentioned already, if you have a space that you can come into, you can connect to the network, you can get on Teams, you can do whatever work you need to do and be as agile as you need to be within that space, I think is really important and really key for what people are looking for. We put some user profiles together for the NRC because obviously it's going to be used by the local unis as well, as well as it being obviously the hospital. It's going to be a research and innovation space. And what we found from the uni students, what do they want? Well, they want to be able to come onto site, be able to connect immediately. Same as the staff, because there will be staff coming from other sites. They want to be able to connect. They want to be able to access the information that they need to. They need to be able to join meetings, etc. So having that connectivity just really seamless is really key.
The connectivity side of things, it's the backbone of what you're trying to achieve. So if we look and fast forward into the future, I'm going to mention the Lister Alliance. So we're both part of that, and actually you were one of the first, if not the first, to help pioneer like that piece. So this is run by the Cisco Country Digital Acceleration team, and it's been built really to help organizations blueprint best practices, which I think is what we're doing. So how do you see that working for the future? I mean, we've just been talking, you're all over the place at the minute, going to talk to people about what you've done that are future customers or partners of the Lister Alliance. As it kind of comes to when the NRC comes online, how are you looking at designing for resilience for any kind of future changes? Does the Lister Alliance still play a part in that?
I think so. We're a Cisco trust anyway. Our infrastructure, our network is Cisco.
Yeah.
We wouldn't have been able to deliver the trials without the support of the CDA from Cisco. We obviously spent a lot of time exploring the market with suppliers, some of which Cisco had recommended, of partners that they worked with. I think it was really key for our trust and probably other trusts, and obviously I'm keeping it specific to hospitals, but to have that market knowledge. We, like I say, we had demos from all sorts of different companies, but what we found was the CDA funds enabled us to be able to actually trial these technologies before we purchased them, which I think was really key, because we all know salespeople will tell you, they'll sell you the dream. You tell them what you want. They'll say they can deliver it. And I think one of the key learnings as well with the trials was actually what you've installed is not necessarily meeting the brief or the use case. And where suppliers were successful, they engaged with us to co-develop a solution that actually met the needs of what we needed it to do. And I think the CDA and the Lister Alliance really helped shape who that core group were going to be going forward from a procurement perspective. And I think the fact that we've used sort of industry expertise has been really key to make sure that we are bringing partners on that are sustainable, that are interoperable with our network, meet cybersecurity, all the things that we need a supplier to do. So going forward, I really hope to continue working with Lister Alliance, and I'm really keen to meet with other NHP schemes cohorts to tell them and share the learnings that we've gained from Linden Lodge and the NRC.
That's absolutely great. I mean, I can wholeheartedly say there isn't a single company out there that will deliver a end-to-end solution for you. Nobody should ever tell you that, in my personal view. Even I sit here as the founder of UMA, and I can tell you now that you can keep going, integrating different things and keep going, and you will always have can you do this? on the end of it. So, our ethos is to, tried and tested, work on certain things, but always have that open mind to collaborate with other suppliers and bring those technologies together and create the solution that's right. So yeah, sales guys are great. I have a sales team. We go out, but we listen before we actually engage. And I think that's really important. If anyone's listening to this, let the professional listen to what you've got to do rather than just talk at and tell you what they need to do. And that's how we built our product.
And that's why you were successful, Steve, because
mic drop.
Yeah.
Well, pen drop. But yeah, that's exactly how we kind of want to be,
Yeah.
right? And how we want to work. So in that future, if I gave you a piece of paper now and said, right, Lisa, there's a building over here, there's a trust, I want you to basically create a super smart building. You've got a blank piece of paper, blank checkbook. What would you do? How would you, where would you start? It can be any space, but let's keep it in clinical. What would be non-negotiable to say?
Non-negotiable would be all of the infrastructure, BMS, sensors, energy clamps, space monitoring, environmental controls, environmental monitoring, all the things that we have trialed or would trial. I think the open protocol, as you've mentioned, would be really key. We knew we would need multiple suppliers to be able to deliver on the full ecosystem of what we wanted to deliver, and actually having that open protocol was really important to be able to deliver on that. I think it's a really hard question for me to answer because I'm not an architect, but I think just having spaces that are, as you've said, ambient, making them useful, really listening to what the staff and the patients need. Because I think even when you are addressing a new build, as soon as you've got a clinician walking into a space, I'll go, what have you done that for? And why have you done that? Because, this isn't going to work because of X, Y, Z. So I think I would get them to design it for me, to be honest.
And that is the perfect answer because you aren't on, it goes back, you are on the ground doing all these things. Even though you're there and you've seen it, you've got experience, they all have different ways of wanting to see things, do things, and coming up with that hybrid.
And everyone will have a different use case of what they want to use the space for. So we can go in from a digital perspective and say, oh, it needs to have this and it needs to have that. But how?
Provide a framework.
Provide a framework and the baseline. But actually, how do you need your space to work? That would be where I would start. What do you want to do within this space? And how would you do it?
I think as well, just before I go on to one of the final questions, and then we do like a quick fire wrap, and I haven't prepped you on this one. So, but where do you see AI in the future of the NHS?
It's a really interesting one, isn't it? Because we already see it. It's already been used. We're using Copilot, which is excellent from an administrative perspective, helping with meetings and minutes, etc. But there's also it's being used in image analysis, which I think is great. We're currently doing an AI tender to look at, and guess I do a gap analysis across the trust of where AI could be used or be better used to address some of the inefficiencies, improve diagnostics. So I think it's coming. It's already being used and it will continue to be developed and invested in. We just need to make sure that we do it in a safe and a secure way, which I think is the tricky bit at the moment because it's new, particularly within the NHS. There was probably some hesitancy when we're looking at cybersecurity, clinical safety, data management. There are those conversations being had, and obviously being the NHS, we want to be really careful of how we approach it. But there's definitely appetite for it.
That's really good to hear because I think AI has its use cases. You've got your internal use cases like Copilot. We were talking about this earlier. It's going to get really to the point where I think AI is managing meetings, and it excites me as a technologist as such. But I do think putting it to use for good around checking images and even having digital assistance for people to get through the day. Like we're working very heavily on AI in scheduling at the moment. So some of the pain points that you talked about around the 30 people sat in a room, what you need is AI to learn those patterns of those therapists, occupational therapists, and start to just create bookings for them and what they're going to be doing with the patient. So we're working quite hard on that at the moment. And like you say, there are some key barriers at the moment, which I think we will get past and figure out. Data, GDPR, you know, AI learns on data. Data needs to come from things being put in, and then it will work from there. But I do genuinely feel excited about what it's going to do for health and well-being, you know, in the future. I don't even know if at some point you'll be chatting with someone and it won't even be a real person, and you'll just be getting advice.
Oh, well, yeah, there's
You know, I think
already
that
AI
happens.
bots,
Yeah,
being in development, not necessarily in healthcare, but I
yeah,
can definitely see it
yeah,
going that way. I personally think it's
yeah.
great. Um, People have reservations about certain elements of it, which I would agree and recognize. Um, it's exciting, I think.
I do. My wife always says to me, "Why don't you just ask ChatGPT? You know, instead of googling it now, it's ask ChatGPT."
Yeah.
It's learned a lot about me in the last 2 years. It's been my kind of personal therapist, strategist, co-founder. It's done a lot. So
If I get an email from you now, is it
it's not me.
it's not you?
So interestingly, Emily from the Lister Alliance, she emailed me the other day, or text messaged me and said, "I've just got an email. Was that you, or was it the AI?" I'm like, "I'm not telling you. You can work that out yourself." But yeah, it learns and responds. I think, you know, how we can practically apply that into things like camera technology as well. So using AI to learn pattern behavior, and if somebody is going to become aggressive, or, you know, those are the types of things that we're really excited about.
We did look at that for Linden Lodge, and we
Yeah,
had some cameras installed. So one of the issues they had there was patients absconding because it's
yeah,
a secure unit. But also patients that weren't under deprivation of liberty were allowed to come and go. So
yeah.
how do you address that?
Are they
So
absconding, or are they just
or
going
is
in and
someone
out?
just, yeah, and who's
Yeah,
allowed to go out the door?
yeah,
It was a difficult challenge, but we started looking at things like facial recognition,
yeah,
and then from there, actually, if we had cameras internally within the reception space, as you said,
yeah,
we can train it to look
yeah,
at aggressive behavior, or even just using the sound to
yeah.
go, well, we know something has escalated in that area.
You
Can
get
it
flags
notify
escalating. Yeah,
security? And we also have some cameras within our high acuity rooms within the NRC, which
yeah,
again, it's an obscured camera, so there's no live feed,
yeah,
but it is trained to detect certain behaviours. So if you have someone who's bedbound that
yeah,
should not be getting out of bed
yeah.
on their own, it would send an alert if there is an intention to get out of bed, so the staff member can try and intervene before there is a fall and try and prevent that accident.
It's better than the
So
cure in
there's so many
everything.
things that you can do with it, but there is this nervousness around, well, it's a camera
Yeah.
within a private space, and how do you make people feel comfortable with that? And also, how is it managed from a ethical point of view?
Yeah.
And I think these are all the questions that we will have to address and have to answer and find resolutions for over the next few years.
I think there's definitely a generational thing there. So if I spoke to my kids, they're not bothered about what data they give to people. Their faces could be taken pictures of. They're just not bothered.
Yeah.
So I think that's why, as the generations move through, we will end up in a point where I think
It's just
it's just going to be
expected.
accepted
Yeah.
and normal. So finally, then, just before the quick fire round, what would you say keeps you awake at night? Um, do you think about buildings, digital technology, human experience, and then conversely as well, what excites you the most about what you're doing?
NRC's kept me awake at night,
Yeah,
obviously, over the last couple of months. Ultimately, making sure that we've delivered on what we have set out to do
yeah,
for the NRC, and that staff are happy with what we've delivered, and that we've delivered on what we've promised,
yeah,
and for patients to really enjoy that experience as well. We've spent a lot of time speaking to patients as well, and what are their challenges and what would they like to see at the NRC that
yeah,
we can implement, such as the patient terminals that I've mentioned. So in addition to patient entertainment, which is a huge step up from Linden Lodge where they didn't have any, they're able to see the menu to order food.
yeah,
We're looking at integrating with the nurse call system, so they can just request a glass of water and that request can just go to the kitchen rather than have to wait for a member of staff. Just all things that can be slightly automated just to make life a bit nicer and
yeah,
better for them. So
yeah.
I guess from my perspective, I want everything within the NRC that's under my remit to work really well, everyone to be pleased with it, but also to carry on that development work, and how can we optimize, how can we make it better? And then, like I say, take that learning then for the rest of the trust, because I'm sure they'll all be keen. I know that, well, there are other divisions in the trust that are keen. They've seen this technology at Linden Lodge, and they've seen what's going in at NRC, and they would like it. But obviously funding is an issue. So yeah, what really, that is what excites me. It excites me. I'm really proud of what the NRC has delivered and what we've installed there. So I'm excited to take that forward to the rest of the trust, where we've got clinicians saying, I've heard you've done this, can we have it? And then, my job now will be to look at doing an analysis at NRC and then an evaluation of what we've installed, so that we can start to build business cases to say, actually, yes, this is an investment. It is going to cost this much, but actually we know that the return on the investment means this, and whether that's improvement in patient and staff experience, or financial, which is obviously what they're going to really be keen on. I think that's really key as well, and it'll be really exciting to see what the results of that evaluation will be.
Do you think financial, maybe procurement, should be involved earlier than what, or did you have them come in too late, too soon, is that, this is just a question I'm trying to give to listeners around how, do you do all the tech, the spec, the work, and then go to the procurement, say, we want that, or do you bring them in earlier?
I think it's, in an ideal world, yes, you would bring them in earlier, typically within the NHS, every department's overstretched. But also what we didn't want to do, it was a really tricky one from a digital perspective, because we were looking at different suppliers, what technology should be going into the NRC 3-4 years before it opens. And what we didn't want to do is go out to procurement and procure something that is then going to be out of date by the time you open. I mean, even for NRC, obviously it's latest tech, but a lot of it was purchased, nearly a year ago now. So there will be new editions of those technologies. So I think the key thing really is get the infrastructure right, and then it doesn't really matter what that end technology is, but we try to leave it as late as possible so that we could have the latest versions of things, rather than having things that are 2-3 seasons before and actually aren't the latest.
Because it does run out. Technology moves at such a fast pace.
It does, and that's why it's really tricky.
It is tricky, isn't it? I think we probably, in the 2 years that we were working with you guys, we iterated maybe 5-6 times on our software, because we were moving with the market. So it's bringing those new features to everyone's attention. So I think it's really, really important. Okay, rapid fire. One building sensor that you think should be standard in the next 3 years in a smart building.
Occupancy.
Okay. Do you want to tell me why?
Again, I think it just is really informative to tell you how your space is being used. And I think that's really key on other decisions.
Okay. One mistake that you see organisations making time and time again when doing a smart building?
I don't know.
You don't know?
I don't have much knowledge about other organisations.
Okay, well, what do you recommend? I'll reword it. What do you recommend people not to do?
Not to, again, limit on the capability of what the building can do, because as we've said, technology changes a lot. You don't want to be stuck with something that will be obsolete. You also don't want, in my opinion, pick one supplier to do everything and then it be a closed book. I think you really do want to have an ecosystem of different things that deliver really well on those particular things, but also are interoperable. I think that's the key thing that we had with the NRC. We wanted to make sure that everything spoke to each other where possible, to make management easier, to make it easier for the clinical staff, so they're not having to log into 1,000,001 different apps. That would be
awesome. So what's the one piece of advice you'd give your younger self? So this is a weird one, isn't it? Before going into a digital role and doing this, what would you have done differently if you knew that you were going to go into that role?
It's really interesting, because I was actually thinking on the drive up here, if you told me 5 years ago that this is what I'd be doing, I'd be quite surprised, because my experience didn't necessarily lend itself to this particular arena. But I'd worked in project management within welfare to work and health and social care. So I had that bit of the background knowledge. I think just being open to, I think part of the good thing about me not having loads of experience within the NHS in particular was that I came in with fresh eyes, and it was really interesting for me to see how the organisation operated and how different it was from private sector, for example, and how things work, and even how the financial side of things are managed. So in terms of advice, I would just say be curious, be engaging with your stakeholders, which completely makes sense. And just be open to learn and listen to the experts, because as I've said, I wasn't an expert in this field, but I worked with a lot of people who were, and I listened to them and took their advice when it was correct.
I think every day is a learning day, I think, and we could all take away, from that. I learn every day. There's new things coming in. And I think if you've got that willingness to learn and look at it from a sort of perspective where you've never seen it before, you can apply that better than somebody that's biased and actually knows everything.
And I probably
asked, talking about.
I probably asked loads of stupid questions, but
no,
actually,
you didn't. They were brilliant. All the questions you asked
were they all brilliant?
Were brilliant. Absolutely
all brilliant.
Fantastic.
But I think I came, and I think part of the benefit of me not really having a lot of that knowledge is I did come into it fresh, and actually, like you said, I had no bias. I hadn't worked with X provider in this sector for this amount of time, which we know happens within organisations. Like, well, this is what I know, and this is what I'm comfortable with. So this is what I'm going to stick with. I was like, well, I don't know, so I'm going to do an analysis of what is being presented to me, and hopefully, make an informed choice based on that rather than my own prejudices or experiences.
Excellent. Right, we're going to wrap it up. Thank you for making the journey to the north. I know it's cold up here today, but it's brilliant. If you want to listen to this podcast, you can get it on YouTube, Spotify, or Apple. Thank you very much for your time. It's been really good and interesting, and I'm really pleased that things are going well with the NRC. Can't wait for it to open.
Hopefully it won't be long.
Amazing. Thank you very much.
Thank you.